Along the coastline of Los Angeles County lies some of the most beautiful, popular, and glamorous beachfront in the entire nation. An amazingly diverse stretch of oceanfront, complete with tall rocky cliffs, secluded tide pools, busy harbors, and wide sandy beaches. For the millions of beachgoers who visit this coastline annually, these beaches present a world of recreational possibilities, from the fast-paced sports of surfing and volleyball to more sedate pursuits like sunbathing or strolling along the beach. In short, this beautiful oceanside environment has become the symbol of Southern California and those who live here. And while there are many different types of beaches here in Los Angeles County, they all have one thing in common, a condition rarely realized by the beach-going public, and yet it threatens to diminish the very usability of these fine beaches. A problem as large as it is small. Sand, or more precisely, the lack thereof. With every crashing wave along the shore, small amounts of sand like this are washed away from our beaches forever. And that's why beaches in Los Angeles County have come to rely on man-made methods for placing sand on the beach. In this program, we'll look at this situation. We'll examine the problems and solutions for maintaining sand on Los Angeles County beaches. We'll even witness the rebirth of a popular local beach threatened by sand loss. So come along as we discover how every day our beaches are becoming lost and found. Sand loss is really the story of natural sand movement and the involvement of mankind in that process. So to understand more, we must examine how common beach sand gets to our coast and why it never stays in one place for long, and what finally happens to this sand that we consider it lost.
How does sand move up and down beaches? There are basically two ways that sand will move back and forth on a beach. Typically, we have waves bringing sand up and dropping it on a beach in periods of, let's say, less agitated water. Very commonly, we would expect this type of onshore movement of sand to take place during the summer months. In the winter months, when the storms are sending very energetic waves into this area, there's more of a turbulence created. There is a cutting out of sand grains and moving them below wave base and forming the bars.
This is why the wide sandy beaches of summer are just that, with a general narrowing of beach widths during the winter months.
But that's not the only type of movement of sand on a beach. In fact, much of the sand is actually not moved directly up, back, and forth on a beach face, but rather it's moved in a somewhat zigzag pattern down the coast according to what we call the prevailing direction of the longshore currents.
Called the longshore drift, this type of sand movement is responsible for the transportation of large quantities of sand along many miles of coastline. Let's take a closer look to see how the sand grains are moved. To the casual observer, ocean waves appear to hit the beach head-on. In fact, incoming waves enter the beach at a very slight angle, causing the wave to crest and break in a particular direction. This powerful rush of water translates into movement along the shore, as well as up the beach. Caught up in the turbulence, sand grains are carried up with the wave and placed onto the beach. As the wave runs out of energy and collapses, the water and the grains fall almost straight back into the ocean, where the whole process is repeated over and over.
Basically, there's going to be an edging up and a dropping down, an edging up and dropping down. So you can imagine the sand grains being kind of zigzagged down the beach according to the general direction of the waves and the winds that are powering these waves.
While the actual distance the sand grains are carried is small, usually no more than a few inches per wave, the cumulative effect of the constant wave action can work to move large quantities of sand over many miles. But the problems of sand loss are not so much the case of sand grains traveling up or down the coast, but rather what they encounter along the way. Here we find the actual, but seldom seen, culprit of coastal beach sand loss. Most offshore beaches slope gradually away from their shores. Occasionally, steep, sharply walled features in the ocean floor interrupt this pattern. They are known as submarine canyons.
And as the longshore currents and the longshore drift encounter the head of this canyon, the sand is funneled down the canyon and is dispersed out onto the deeper bay floor. Let's just say that we are gradually leaking sand, and I think that would be an appropriate term, leaking it into deep submarine canyons, delivering it to the deep ocean floor where the waves can no longer scoop it up, even in the most energetic wave periods of winter storms, and deposit it on the coast. The question of why we still have beaches is largely due to the fact that in many parts of the world we are losing sand to the deep ocean basins, but at the same time it's being replenished by sand being brought to the beaches by streams, river systems, sand from the inlands, and to a lesser extent sand that's released by wave action pounding against a coast. So if you want to know the origins of most of the sand, look to the mountains.
As the mountains and hills located inland slowly erode under the forces of wind and weather, this broken rock material eventually takes the form of sand grains. From there, seasonal rains wash the sand grains into nearby streams and creeks. As most rivers eventually find their way to the ocean, the suspended sand particles are pulled along by the force of the water and dumped into the ocean. Wave action then washes the sand grains back up on the shore, adding the new sand to the beach. This process has been constantly replacing the sand lost into submarine canyons for the past millions, perhaps billions of years.
And you can actually work out a sand budget, measuring what is lost to the deeper water against what's brought in. The problem, of course, is humans interfere with sand transport systems.
In the spring of 1938, powerful rainstorms descended on Los Angeles, dropping huge amounts of rain on the growing metropolitan area in a short period of time. The result was widespread flooding, property damage, and loss of life. The realization that Los Angeles was in flood country became all too apparent. Because of this, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers quickly set about a plan to stop any future floods from wreaking havoc. In place of local rivers and streams, they created an elaborate system of concrete flood control channels, dams, and catchment basins. Today, these many miles of channel have become a seldom noticed but very essential part of our urban landscape. And while flood control channels are great for the protection of life and property, they are not so good for local beaches.
The problem, of course, they may serve to trap water, but they also serve to trap the sediment that ordinarily would make its way over a long period of time, or sometimes very quickly during a flood, down to the beaches and resupply the beaches with fresh volumes of sand to make up for the sand that's always trickling down the submarine canyons into the deep basins.
Suddenly, Los Angeles had a new dilemma. If the old method of supplying sand no longer worked, then the beaches would gradually disappear, leaving only tough coastal rocks and cliffs.
Now, the beaches along Santa Monica Bay historically were relatively narrow, and that's because they never really got enough sand from all of the drainage. They never really got enough sand from all of the small creeks that drain into the coastal area. So the narrow beaches in Santa Monica Bay, under natural conditions before the floodworks were installed, would have been even narrower and would have received even less sand because of those engineering works, those flood control engineering works.
But it's been over half a century since the flood channels were placed. And as any beachgoer knows, LA County beaches are still very much in evidence.
Well, to compensate for this problem of damming streams and blocking sediment coming down to the beach, people in the Los Angeles area, and other parts of the world for that matter, have attempted a variety of projects called beach renourishment. And what this basically involves is taking sand from one area along the coast and trucking it, or sometimes moving it through pipeline slurry systems, or sometimes moving it via conveyor belt down to the beach, and artificially adding sand to the beach to once again make up for that deficit of sand that's been blocked by our flood control projects.
For this reason, LA County beaches are now considered artificial, man-made through the process of beach renourishment. And while the idea of moving sand to a beach may sound simple, the realities of finding and moving tons of sand are anything but easy. Many of the past renourishments which took place in LA County have actually come as the byproducts of major oceanside construction or development projects. And while there have been a number of these renourishments in the past, there has been no single greater source of sand to the beaches of Santa Monica Bay than the building of the Hyperion sewage treatment plant in the 1940s.
Some years ago, when the Hyperion sewage facility was built down by El Segundo, the sand from the coastal dunes area, some of these old stabilized dunes, that was disturbed in the construction project was immediately hauled onto the adjacent beach, dumped into the longshore currents, something like about 14 million cubic yards of sand through the life of the project, and the longshore currents carried it both to the south and with reversals of the currents when wind was coming in from other directions carried it to the north.
Today, over half of the original sand removed from the Hyperion site still covers LA County beaches from Redondo Beach in the south to Will Rogers Beach in the north. And the role of the Hyperion plant in sand renourishment has continued to the present. In 1988, expansions at the plant attracted the interest of the County of Los Angeles Department of Beaches and Harbors.
When I learned that Hyperion was going to expand, I already knew that the majority, about three-fourths of all the beach out in Santa Monica Bay now that people recreate on every day literally came from the site at the El Segundo Dunes, which used to be sitting under what is now Hyperion Sewage Treatment Plant. So I called the Department of Public Works LA City, and we began discussions about moving that sand across the street to Dockweiler State Beach.
The situation was perfect. Hyperion had the sand, and Dockweiler State Beach was located only 1,000 yards away from the plant. So in 1988, sand from the construction site at Hyperion began moving by conveyor belt under a local highway and right onto the beach.
And when we finished, that was about a 5-month project, I believe. When we finished, we had approximately 1.1 million cubic yards of sand, extending that beach about 250 feet oceanward and creating an additional 22 acres of recreational beach.
But for some beaches, solutions to sand loss are more difficult than others. Let's take a look at one beach faced with this serious problem. Located 26 miles south of downtown Los Angeles and situated next to the Los Angeles harbor, the beach is called Cabrillo, named in honor of the famous Spanish explorer. Located in the community of San Pedro, Cabrillo is different from other beaches insomuch as it began as a man-made beach. So in order to understand the workings of this beach, we'll need to look back to see how this beach was created. The origins of Cabrillo Beach actually go back to the beginning of this century, when the construction of the huge LA City breakwater began in the San Pedro area. Once completed, this wall of rocks formed the Los Angeles harbor, turning the Los Angeles area into a major seaport. The western end of this breakwater ended at the cliffs of Point Fermin in San Pedro. No one thought much about this corner of land and breakwater until 1928, when it was decided that San Pedro needed a beach. So, during a regular dredging of the harbor bottom, the sand was placed on the outside corner of where the breakwater met the shore. This pocket of sand became known as Outer Cabrillo Beach. With the addition of buildings, picnic facilities, and a parking lot, Cabrillo Beach quickly established itself as a major recreational resource for the residents of Los Angeles. In modern times, Cabrillo Beach became one of the most utilized beaches in Los Angeles, receiving up to 12,000 visitors per day on weekends. The reasons for this popularity were simple: easy access from Los Angeles and the large number of recreational opportunities to be found at the beach. Not only was Cabrillo a classic sand, swim, and surf setting for local beachgoers, the area also had a large shaded picnic area, popular for family get-togethers and group meetings. There was also a set of seaside playground equipment for the beach's youngest visitors. Beachgoers' safety was closely watched by the Los Angeles County lifeguards, who monitor the many activities of this beach from high atop their lifeguard building and nearby towers. Cabrillo Beach has become synonymous with sailboarding in Los Angeles. Known to the locals as Hurricane Gulch, Cabrillo's situation to the coast leaves it unsheltered from the high ocean winds which cross the beach during the afternoons, a condition which almost guarantees fast rides and great sailing for LA's growing number of sailboarders. In 1932, the beach became the site for the Cabrillo Marine Museum, an institute dedicated to the education and the understanding of our nearby ocean resources. Although the museum was moved from its original building and relocated to a larger and more modern facility several hundred yards away, the beach still serves as an educational tool for thousands of LA youngsters. Field trips to the museum almost always include a walk across the beach for a hands-on lesson in marine life. Cabrillo Beach had also become an important reserve for local sea life. The rocky shore west of the beach became home to a small section of tide pools, and every spring the sands of Cabrillo Beach serve as the mating ground for grunion fish, who need the sandy shores to lay their eggs. A large bit of kelp offshore provides the local sea life with an important marine habitat. Sadly, the recreational and ecological importance of Cabrillo Beach was becoming overshadowed by the simple fact that the beach was slowly but surely eroding away.
It is not a beach that, where it is located, it cannot be replenished by Mother Nature in a natural way. So once it was created by man, if we wanted to keep it there, we had to keep placing more sand on the beach as it eroded over the years.
The cause of Cabrillo's sand loss was due to a deep water area at the southern tip of the beach. The combination of wave action and this sink served to pull away the sands of the beach and send it to the bottom of the trench. And while a special rock jetty designed to slow the transport of sand was placed south of the beach in 1963, Cabrillo continued to lose valuable sand at an estimated rate of 10,000 cubic yards per year. By 1991, 27 years since Cabrillo's last renourishment of harbor sand, beach widths ranged from 150 feet at the widest to non-existent in some areas. Already, the shortened shoreline had allowed past storm waves to cross the beach and damage buildings and parking lots. It would only be a matter of time before the remaining beach would disappear, leaving backshore facilities completely vulnerable to flooding and high tides. Sand loss would also mean an ecological tragedy for local grunion and other creatures who relied on the beach for their continued existence. In short, an important coastal resource was becoming useless, even hazardous to beachgoers and marine life. This dilemma did not go unnoticed by the Los Angeles County Department of Beaches and Harbors, the local agency responsible for the maintenance of Cabrillo Beach. But while the department's planning division became increasingly aware of the problem, an immediate solution could not be found until a combination of events and action by the department turned the sand loss situation around. Under a mandate from the Environmental Protection Agency to improve the waters of the Santa Monica Bay, the Hyperion Sewage Treatment Plant was gearing up construction on additional treatment facilities. A side result would be large quantities of displaced sand. As with the previous beach renourishments, this was too good to pass up.
The sand had to be moved, which is the area where the new facilities will go, and construction had to start, and that opened the door for me to step in and say I'd like the sand and state where we'd like to put it.
Like the historical beach renourishments of the 1940s and the more recent Dockweiler beach renourishment of the late 1980s, Hyperion would again serve as the source of sand for a starving Los Angeles County beach. The amount of sand to be moved? 200,000 cubic yards. While much less sand than the Dockweiler State Beach renourishment, the operation would be no less difficult.
It took a lot of thought because even though it was a smaller project, the logistics of getting the sand to Cabrillo were certainly horrendous when you consider moving this much sand 26 miles down a freeway as opposed to moving it across the street.
But before a single new grain of sand could be dropped on the beach, a number of factors had to be examined. Best possible sand placement, effects of offshore currents on new sand, beach characteristics, water quality, even questions about beach aesthetics and recreation potential needed to be asked.
In addition, we had an environmental problem to worry about, which was there is a kelp bed that sits right offshore, and that is literally the house for various forms of fishes and animals and so on and so forth. And we had to be very careful when we placed that the sand didn't go down into the water and strangle the kelp beds or kill the various forms of fish life, marine life.
The plan was ambitious and well thought out. Sand would be placed on an 1,850-foot segment of the shoreline, extending the beach by an extra 350 feet, and expanding the total beach area by 10.1 acres. Flanked on both sides by buffer zones, the western buffer would protect the offshore kelp bed, while the eastern zone would allow the regular transport of sand to fill the eastern beach. Plans in place, the trucks began to arrive. Each day, 285 trips were made from Hyperion to Cabrillo, with the arrival of 1 truck per minute. Each truck carried 20 cubic yards of sand, amounting to 6,000 cubic yards of new sand on the beach every workday. Delivery of the sand from truck to beach was made simple with a specially built road along the beach. Once over the correct spot, the drivers would open the bottom gates of their loaders, spilling the fresh sand onto the beach. In order to make room for the next truckload, each pile of new sand had to be quickly removed from the road and then placed along the beach. For this duty, bulldozers and scrapers were used, pulling and pushing load after load of fresh sand toward the ocean. Work progressed as time went on, and it seemed as though sunny days and clear weather would keep the trucks rolling on schedule. But 2 months into the project, something totally unexpected happened. High waves from a passing storm pulled large amounts of sand away from the point where the new sand had entered the ocean. Suddenly, the eastern part of the beach, which was not to receive any new sand except through years of gradual wave transport, found itself almost as wide as the central section. Where ocean waves had once touched a rock wall barrier, 50 feet of new beach now separated the wall from the ocean. There was also another unexpected result from these storm waves. Strong currents carried sand up and through gaps in the rock jetty and into the oceanside corner. Where once stood only the stone walls of the breaker, now sat a small beach. Called Outer Cabrillo Beach A, the new little pocket beach was welcomed by the surprise project planners, since the sand offered an additional 100 feet of brand new recreational beach.
Everybody's quite happy about it. As a matter of fact, they put a lifeguard tower out there, and people are using that beach as well as the other beach. So now what we have is the inside beach, the outside beach, and outside beach A.
As work continued, the overall look of the beach began to improve, especially where the new sand was compared to the old sand. Where the old sand was fine and slightly bluish, the fresh sand was redder and coarser. The color was temporary, as within months the red would bleach out due to the effects of sun and seawater. But because the new sand was much larger than the existing sand, it was less likely to be taken up by wave action, while at the same time it insulated the old underlying fine sand from erosion. "31 workdays after the first load of sand was dropped on Cabrillo, the beach now had all the sand it would receive from the Hyperion sewage treatment plant. This part of the project completed, work began on the smaller touches of returning Cabrillo back into a recreational beach. As a final touch, a single line of shore parallel dune was placed on the back shore of the constructed berm to protect the beach facilities from wave-induced flooding and supply sand for any future emergency renourishments. The dune was gently sloped as not to obstruct the ocean view from the back shore of the beach. At last, bulldozers gone and the fencing removed, Cabrillo Beach was reopened to the public. A small dedication ceremony was held for the occasion and hosted by the people of the many departments involved in saving the beach. Some of the happiest participants of the renourishment were members of the local Polar Bear Club, some of whom had been swimming at Cabrillo since it was created.
We couldn't even get into the water because there's so many rocks. Because of the tidal action and the rocks, it's just almost impossible to get through it sometime. But now with this sand here, it's covered up a lot of those rocks, and I think that we're far of the beneficiaries of something really good that this city and county have done for us.
Cabrillo was now a fully rejuvenated beach, with enhanced recreational value and the ability to provide protection to its beach facilities. But we must remember there are no permanent victories in the arena of sand renourishment. Even the successes of Cabrillo Beach must be seen in a realistic light. Like before, the new sand will begin to fall down the coast, and someday, in the decades ahead, Cabrillo Beach will again need renourishing. And while Cabrillo Beach has been saved for a time, the problems of sand erosion at other LA County beaches presses on. At Las Tunas Beach near Malibu, the ocean has taken a major toll on this once proud beach. Stripped nearly bare of all sand and burdened with severely eroded and dangerous metal jetties, Las Tunas now waits, in line to receive the next supply of sand. So as the story of Cabrillo Beach comes to an end, the story of Las Tunas Beach is just beginning.
If we let these beaches return to their natural condition, they'll be narrow and rocky, and that's what will happen if we don't continue to constructively interfere with the process and continue to supply volumes of sand to the shoreline to keep these beaches nice and wide. So the proper question is, how do we do that? How do we assemble the political and the social will and, as importantly, the money to continue to be able to supply these beaches with sand over the coming years? That's the big question.
This concludes our look at the process of beach renourishment. As you've seen, the art of keeping sand on the beach requires people who not only have a special concern for the beach environment, but the skill and ingenuity to keep that environment safe and protected. The next time you're at the beach, think about all that goes into keeping that sand under your feet.